Hi, everyone. It's Nancy Reyes with For Your Canine.
And Lisa Bataska with Canine Defined.
Let us know you're out there. Today, we're going to be talking about arousal. I know we talk about it some, and I think it's one of those things that's kind of misunderstood because you hear it. Arousal really is defined. We talk about high drive. We hear those words to describe a highly aroused dog, and there's a lot of they think the dog has a lot of energy, and it's kind of confused with some certain things. So we want to kind of help shed some light on um what it is and what it isn't, what's productive and what's not productive. And we see a lot of the productive and non-productive in dog sports. So we're going to reference those a bit, but also in regular life, some of the issues that people have that are presented as a certain problem when it really is arousal or lack of being able to control arousal, right? So initially, just to talk about arousal, everybody needs arousal. Like we're all without arousal, we'd be dead. So that's it. So all aroused. Like, I'm aroused because I'm awake, and all that. It's just the levels of productive and non-productive arousal. So that's what we're going to kind of delve into a little bit today, and how to know the difference, right? So, Lisa, you said you had the definition of arousal, Andy.
Yeah, so when we were doing this, I, excuse me, I kind of looked at the Wikipedia definition. It says arousal is a physiological or psychological state of being awake or reactive to stimuli. It involves the activation of the reticular activating system in the brainstem, the autonomic nervous system, and the endocrine system, leading to increased heart rate and blood pressure and a condition of sensory alertness, mobility, and readiness to respond. And I think readiness to respond, right? So, dog trainer Trish King um, talks about thinking of arousal as a red cloud of energy that interferes with judgment and causes poor behavior. One minute your pup may be barking at a passerby, and the next he'll be redirecting and fighting with your other pets. And another example, your dog may be playing and tugging at your clothes and suddenly nip you harder than usual. His arousal is so high that he is no longer capable of gauging the pressure of his jaw as he normally does during calmer play.
Right. And
So
that's not to say that all dogs can tip over from normal arousal to biting you or biting other dogs. It happens, but some dogs tend to be more prone to it than others, right?
And
Um,
you'll see that more in like teenage times, right? When they have their emotions are all over the place and you're like reacting versus
right.
thinking.
Right. And so, especially, yeah, especially as with an adolescent or young dogs. And also, you see a lot of some of this in agility, right? Where the dogs are, they're running, but they're not clean, and they're just barking and screaming, and everybody's like, "Oh, he has a lot of drive." Well, it's not really productive, so it's not really helpful. But also, if you, and like I said, it's like some people can handle stressful situations and being at a being active and being at a very noisy place, and they can handle it fine, and other people, either they get over the top where they can't control themselves, and they do things that they normally wouldn't, or they shy away from it and try to leave it because they can't handle that. So you want to look at like who's your dog, right? So Lisa and I have both had dogs get aroused easily, and arousal is different than energy. Okay, energy is how the dog moves through life, right? Does he walk mostly, or does he run mostly through life? Or and then I'm talking just regular when they're at home. Do they just get up and run over here to this and see that, or they just walk over kind of easy? That's normally in the normal in your dog's normal life. How do they move through space? That kind of dictates a little bit about their energy level, right? Arousal is what makes them, how quickly they get activated. right? And they can go up or down, right? Because
Mhm.
arousal is also goes two ways, up and down, right? So that's kind of what we look at. A lot of people like, oh, he's so energetic. A lot of times, it's arousal. Most of the time, right?
And I think the big tell is the quality of emotion, correct?
Right,
Right? So,
right,
like, if somebody's excited and they start erratic, moving fast, 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 people think that's energy, but that could be reaction. It could be a stress response, right? Because you shouldn't be that fast moving. Your biology, the way that your body's responding, shouldn't be on the ready to like attack or run away, because that's your fight or flight, right? So I think that, like, speaking up to like what Nancy was talking about with the spinning up and spinning down, there's a difference. And it's hard. I think it's easy to see when they spin up and they arouse, get excited and out of control type of thing, versus when they compress and get quiet. Like for me, when I'm in an uncomfortable situation, it is not common for me to become highly reactive. I'll just get quiet and then, kind of be like, oh, this is a lot. So I'm going to remove myself from that. Um, so, and then I think a really good piece of this is also important is to think about too. And what we're looking for is optimal performance, right? Performance that is not too much or too little. And so if you look at the Yerkestad law, it talks about how to surf that fine line of arousal where it's enough. And I can put it in where I'll put it so that you guys can take a look at that. But that's a really cool, if you start researching and looking at it, it talks about how to get optimal performance, right? Because if they're too low, they're not really thinking, they're compressed, or it's just not enough energy for performance. Or if they are too high, this is where injuries occur, right? So you
right,
have to know how much is too much because it's critical. It will damage your dog.
right. And the thing is, and then some dogs could be in a very highly intense situation and never go over the top and getting over where they make poor decisions. But the young, like Lisa alluded to, the younger your dog is and the more you got hormones and all that going in, the more you have to monitor that arousal to be able to handle it. And yes, Patty, this is my shepherd and he's having big feelings at the moment. So
As shepherds do.
yeah, he always has he always has pretty big feelings about a lot of stuff. Anyway, speaking of arousal, um, one of the things that even though it never tips into the bad situation, when other dogs are going in and out, he gets very aroused and he barks more and all that stuff. But otherwise, he's not. He's normally a pretty chill dog. However, he also never gets overly over the top that anything bad, that nothing bad ever happens. He just makes a lot of noise, which drives me crazy. But as far as arousal goes, he's still pretty steady Eddie. He doesn't go, you know.
And I guess the tell too is like in that moment, if you ask your dog to stop and think, will they?
Hmm.
Right? So if you question whether or not this is arousal or functional or not functional, if I ask you to stop and sit, can you? And I'll
Yeah,
give you a moment to kind of collect yourself. But if you can't, Houston, we have a problem,
yeah.
right? So,
And it's something to teach because I actually, now that Lisa mentioned that, we were allowing our young dogs to play Amy's dogs, and they're running around, and they wanted us to throw the ball, and we're asking my young lab, "Can you sit so I can throw the ball?" And he was like, so his
yeah,
response got really slow. So that means
yes.
even though if you by looking at him, he looks pretty chilled, but
Right, and that's an example of compressing, right? With to not be able to respond. So it doesn't. It looks like, well, he's not responding, but he's not over aroused either. So it goes either way. You can go up or down, spin up or down, right? So
mm,
that's a perfect example of that.
yep. And it's one of those things that we do a lot because he has to be able
Mhm.
to. He was running and playing. Can you bring it in
Right.
to do what I ask you? That's usually how you know your dog is in balance, right? If I
Right.
ask, if you're running around, can you come when I call you, or can you sit when I ask you? And in some cases, dogs that are overstimulated, and it's a good way to test if you're not sure, especially if a dog that may, it's like it came out of nowhere. It usually doesn't. Usually it's been brewing there. So you have them sit? Can you have them come? Can you have them do some basic simple things when they're in that aroused state? Then usually means it's pretty balanced, right? Because arousal is good. Arousal is not always bad. Sometimes you need arousal to, especially if you have a dog that doesn't get aroused really easily. Um, if you want to do performance, that can be tough because the dog's like, okay, especially like if you want to do agility or whatever, they
Yeah,
can.
well, then that's where you feel like you're cheerleading situations. It's
Right,
almost like it's depending, right? So if I have a dog who spins up, it's then you feel like you're trying to smash them down. Whereas if you have a dog who compresses, you're like a cheerleader. Come on, let's go. And it depends what role you want to play. It's not good or bad. It's information.
right.
Um, but I also think so. Somebody had posted about let me look back. Stephanie Johnson had posted, looking forward to the segment. I have a Dane who gets frustrated while standing outside the confirmation ring. He vocalizes loudly, can bounce sometimes. Not great when you see a giant dog. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So Stephanie, one of the things
How
that
old?
yeah,
In
he's
my
quite
question.
young. And the other thing too, you can always work to that, right? You can always work to teach them how to impulse control, because when they're young is when we are young, we all animals, when we're young, we sometimes aren't going to make such great decisions.
A lot
So
of times.
when well it's true, when you're young, you shouldn't do it, but you're going to do it anyway, which is very similar to dogs when they're in that adolescent, right? So there's got to be consequences, and there's got to be and then you got to be have some education. Like for my young dog, if they get, that's I use play to do a lot of it. I'm very lucky. I have clients and other trainers that have young dogs, so we do regularly get together and allow our dogs to play. And we do work on coming. We work, can you sit, can you collect yourself from this, because that's the easiest, most benign way to see where your dog if your dog can handle it. Like I said, my young puppy was playing with Amy's young puppy, and now they're what, 15 and 16 months respectively, and he couldn't sit while Amy was trying to ask him to throw a ball. He was like, "Oh my god!" It took him a minute to collect himself to do that. So in between play, doing that is very helpful. And mind you, they had a day where they had some mental work today. Um, so they weren't as aroused as they normally are when they're fresh, and they don't and they're pretty, but teaching them how to maintain a good level of arousal in a certain situation is really, really important. And you have to do quite a lot of it when they're adolescents, because otherwise it just then they become adults not being able to do that.
I think too, like you want to do it as a puppy. So we play, play, play. Can you stop? Can you sit? And I think I have video of this too, where you do when you do it when they're young, it's a little easier
Yes.
to for them to like revert back to that muscle, right? And they call this it's resilience conditioning, basically, right? So you bounce up and can you come back down to normal after I give you a moment? And then exercising that muscle is what's critical. So in I guess in Stephanie's case, I would look at like how old is the dog? Can you do some of this stuff outside of the ring? Because you're
Yep.
going to have to, anytime you do behaviors, you're going to need to take those behaviors and do them in a benign situation where there's not a lot going on. And you need to identify what the trigger is. Is the trigger a combination of standing at the ringside and you have bait? And you're kind of not paying attention to them, right? Because then you have a patience element there or lack of it. And he's like, push, push, push. So those are some things to consider, right? I mean, why? You have to dissect the behavior to determine what aspect you need to affect. Anyway, so I guess I'd have some questions on that.
Yeah. So yeah, Felicia wiggles because she's got a little bit of an anxiety component, and she gets aroused when she gets anxious. So now yeah, so when she's at work, and Felicia's been really working hard on it, where she get her to settle down around other dogs, and she's pretty, she likes other dogs. She's a pretty nice dog, and just a
Mhm.
really sweet dog. But she has a little bit of anxiety, and that can get her overly aroused, and all
Well,
that.
when there's always a sense of security
Yep.
that's at stake, right?
Yep.
That's going to have trigger you to respond in some fashion. And again, when I'm posed with a threat or what I consider a threat, whatever that is, how do I handle it? Do I go up or do I go down? Right. So do I make myself known and get away from me, blah, 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 or excited? Or do I back away quietly and just try to avoid conflict?
Right. And and it's been a work in progress, right? But and she's also doing now more like barn hunt and scent work, which is really helping build her confidence. So that's also really, in combination with all the other stuff she's doing. Because that's what I mean, you guys. It's a lot of work early on, and
Yeah.
Wiggles is a young dog. She's 2. But doing it when they're young, it'll pay dividends when they're older. If you just ignore it or you don't deal with it when they're young, it becomes tougher because it becomes a very ingrained behavior. Remember,
Right. Because a
neural
neural
pathway,
pathway.
the neural pathways in the brain are going to build when they're in that way. So that's why working on it when they're young. Yes, it's hard, but it's totally worth the time to do.
And I remember Wiggles when I first saw her. I'm like, oh, she's nervous, but she's able to split attention. And when I first met her, she was pretty young. I don't remember exactly how old she was, but I don't know if she was like 6 months or thereabouts. And but here she is 2 years later, still honing those skills, right?
Right.
And I think people need to understand that when you're honing skills, it's a process of rehearsal and making it more of who they are, and they're switching to an automatic behavior, right? So this is what we do when. So I think that's really important to consider when you're working with dogs. It's not one and done. It takes time, just like it takes time for us to learn new skills, go to school, go to college, blah, 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 and do those things. It takes time.
Yep. And that's what I mean. I think people
Six
lose
months,
their
yeah.
patience, especially if you have a dog that tends to get highly aroused
Right.
really fast, right?
Yep.
Because some dogs go from 0 to 60 pretty quick. And other dogs, like my shepherd, he can get aroused, but it takes, he doesn't, it's not a flip of a switch. It takes him a minute. The only, and he, there's a lot of anticipatory things that go on when we are going to let the other dogs out or whatever that he's already cued in. So it takes him a little bit, to get aroused. My labs are pretty, they're pretty good. Like I said, the worst thing for my young puppy, 16 months, can you sit? And didn't take him long. It was a few seconds, and he was like, "Oh yeah, okay," and he was able to bring himself back down. And arousal is it's you're born with what you have, right? You can just put training around it to make it better, but it's hard to change your how you get aroused. It really is. It's like me. I'm I can be pretty excitable about things, so I can go up pretty fast, and I've been that way my whole life. But as I've gotten older, I've learned how to just
So it's the initial response, right? So
right,
remember, the definition is physiological response to stimuli. What you do after that is what we can affect, but not the initial response, right? They'll go, our goal would be to build that wick between the starting the arousal or the arousal piece, and then, oh, yeah, I should think about talking to mom or dad or whatever the case may be.
right. And this is really important when you have a dog that's reactive, right? Because yeah, Felicia, it takes more patience. Yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah. It's not so I wish I wish
The button.
yeah, it would be it would be but yeah, it's like we get that question a lot. How many classes does it take? Oh, well,
It
depends.
depends. And also, I think too, this is where these types of how you react can damage your relationship if you push too hard, or it starts changing the dynamics of your relationship with your dog, right? So I think if you push too hard or you try to be more corrective, it could spin the dog up depending
Yep.
on how they handle pressure, or it could shut them down, right? So my puppy, who, he's a sensitive guy, all I have to do is, hey, don't do that. And she's like, okay, I'm sorry. And if I apply too much pressure, he will get worried. And I have to be really careful
Mhm.
to monitor that because I don't want that to be a thing in our relationship. Right. Whereas, believe it or not, so that's my 6, 7 month old puppy. My Papillon, who's a year and a half, I could be like, knock it off, and he's like, "What's your problem?" And then I have to get up and walk. He's like, "Oh, you mean it?" Right? I mean, and he's 5 pounds versus my, whatever 30 pound Aussie.
Yeah.
So you think of those things too, because how we address those things will also affect
Yeah.
how our relationship is. And I get it. I'm not a fan of my puppy right now. He's killing me. But
And
you that's where you put in management, right?
and here Gail put 8 years old is Mr. Friedman, still working on it. Well, and there's a really good example today. It just happened to happen. I was out with my puppy, trying to get him to potty. Gail was out with Mr. Friedman, and Mr. Friedman was, barking at my puppy. Well, previously Gail would have been very upset and would have been more, gotten more tense, but she didn't. She was pretty relaxed. And she's
Right.
like, "Oh, cut it out," because it was a very benign. He was a little barky. He wasn't losing his mind. He was just barking. And Gail's like, "Oh, knock it off." And because her reaction was so calm, Mr. Friedman's like, "Yeah, okay."
Right.
He was like,
Right.
"Okay," and he didn't. It didn't become a bigger thing. It was just
But he's also 8 too, right? And
yes.
so those are things you have to consider because I do feel and I do believe age plays into this,
Oh yeah,
plus rehearsal, plus history of allowance, right? So if you've allowed these things and fed into it, it just continues to grow.
right.
Like don't feed the frenzy.
Yeah, and Gail didn't. She was like,
Yeah,
"Meh." Maybe because it was too cold, she couldn't do it, but she was really good. She's like, "Oh, just knock it off, Mr. Friedman," and it
right.
never got past a little bark, right? Never got more than that. So
And Liz also pointed out if she does it with her dog, Rumor, who's a German Shepherd, that it amps her up even more.
mm,
And remember, that is genetic. That is a breed specific. It can be
yeah,
breed specific on top of it. So if you pick for sporting specific lines, then, for example, my Dutchie, if all I have to do is look at her and be like, "Ah," and she's like, "We're going to play," and she gets on, but I'm like, "Don't sit." And so we've worked that, and that's what I love about her. But if you've selected, there's certain breeds that are prone to it. Shepherds, right? Maybe not yours, but
yeah,
um, yours would be like, I don't understand. But like my Dutchies, Shepherds, Malleys, all those kinds of breeds that were designed for bite type of work are more inclined to it, and terriers.
mhm, yes, yes, because that's what they're.
I
Well,
mentioned.
if you think about
Yeah,
what they're bred to do.
right.
They breed in a more aroused dog.
Yeah,
Because if you have a dog that's got, like I'll be honest, Tango to try to get him to do bite work, it's just not going to happen.
right.
He's just not that dog. I mean, I think we could try to get it done, but I think it'd be hard work to do that.
And you pick your battles, right, with that. It's like if I have a dog who's super aroused, I would spend a little more time on impulse control exercises or trying to
Right.
get them to be more thoughtful about what I'm asking of them. And then once I can engage that part of it, then I'll throw that in on fun stuff like agility is one, which is great, but if they have an unhealthy amount or non-functional part of arousal, they're going to hurt themselves. I mean, they're going to fall off. They're going to run off the dog walk. They're not going to think. And
Yes.
that is what you want to avoid. And remember, most dogs are, that's a high impact sport. So is fly ball, for example, right? Fly ball. But I think the difference with fly ball and agility is there's a pattern to fly ball versus agility can change every time. And I think that can be frustrating for some dogs depending on their tolerance levels.
Right. Right.
So,
So anyway, so arousal is something that as dog trainers we work with it all the time because arousal again can go up or down like wiggles. if you put pressure on her, she will shut down. That's just how it is. Fortunately, Felicia is pretty chilled, so it really helps. It helps that's it helps that situation kind of mesh well. So that's very
Did you get the video that Liz had sent?
yep, I
And
have
maybe you
it.
could hit videos
Waiting.
and
Yeah,
stuff.
yep, we can come on now, sync it up. It's still
So Liz
syncing.
said we're finally at arousal being functional in a lot of things. Nancy's a video that what's not functional, but I had to take those steps to go get where we're at.
So
Yeah,
it's
it's a
done.
process.
Yeah, it's a big process. So and remember I had a dog, remember Lucy?
Yep.
Uh her arousal, it was just wow.
And
And
the
she
other thing too is
was only 10 pounds.
And
Yikes.
the other thing too is that it's the arousal, but again, remember the after effect of it. Like, how long does it take for them to resolve it, right? So I think that's what's interesting about like the
Right.
resilience rainbow with the resilience conditioning, go up, come back down, and working that muscle so that the dogs are more inclined to have some skills. And I think it's a skill that people don't do. Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay. But go ahead.
Good. Go ahead. You're good.
No, no, go ahead and let's watch that video. I think that'd
Oh,
be
let me
really
see if I can do it.
You've got the one with Amy's dough on currently. Do you want
Yeah.
to look at
So
that?
yeah, let me see if we can, because this is not liking what I want to do here. So it's not it's not allowing me to. Okay, hold on one second. Okay, so which one do you want to see? Which one?
The one that it's queued up, I think, already for.
Oh, so this is Amy's dog. So this is arousal kind of the other way. She's a little. This dog is, well, you'll see.
I think this is the dough.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is Doberman.
careful.
So I videotaped her coming down the hallway, right? And just for everybody's purposes, she does have a malformed leg, but it doesn't affect her. Trust me on that. I couldn't imagine if she didn't. Anyway. All right. So we're just doing a practice. This is just a practice that we're working on. Nothing crazy. And Amy is working on getting her under control
And,
um, before she runs nose work. Okay.
and you're gonna mute the volume, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Because I think a lot of times we can be influenced by what the person's saying. But look at her coming in.
Yep. Look at her coming in.
Forward pulling.
Yep. Look at her coming in. This is kind of, and Amy is working on but not pulling. But for right now, we want it
And
for.
she's a teenager, so
Yep.
she's
She's 15
extremely
months
impatient.
old. Yeah. She's
Yeah.
15 months old. So here Amy is trying to get her to relax, give her something behavior,
Excuse me.
and she still was so excited. Yes. She had to she still bypassed it and had to come up
Yeah.
for it.
And that's a perfect example of the dog who comes in too hot, right? They come in too hot and they'll pass hides or blow the first jump or knock the jump or whatever, name it, right? And I think that's what you have to pay attention to. It's not that they don't know it. Maybe their arousal's too high. So you assess that.
Yeah. So here's another video. And this is the opposite of oh my god, I almost said twinkle, of sparkle, right? Twinkle, sparkle, it's all shiny. uh, so this is the opposite of what you see. So I want you guys to, when you're looking at it, I want you to tell me what your thoughts on it when you see this dog come in and work. Yes. So what did you think of that video? I'll play it one more time. Clearly I didn't mute it well enough. So what are some of the things you guys see that speaks to the type of arousal for this dog?
So I think when she first came in, it looks like if you don't catch it, she doesn't check the boxes. She's looking around, right? And her mouth is open. She's panting. She's oriented to the camera. She's like, "What's that?" And she's kind of more aware. Yeah, she doesn't seem to be working. Deb Evans said.
Yep.
Yeah, not initially, but then she's like, she had to check. She's environmental, right? So she comes in, checks out her environment, and then says, "Oh, okay, I forgot we're
Mhm.
doing this thing." It's just Nancy at the end of the
Yep.
row.
And she has improved a great deal, because she and this is Amy has worked really hard at new environments and new getting her out and about, because that's a challenge. So now it's kind of reduced. It's reduced how long it takes her to process the environment, where before it was just, it would take her quite a bit to be able to uh, it would take her a little bit to be able to.
Yeah, so this is after some time, right? But remember, it's working that muscle, the resilience muscle. Get up, get concerned, but be aware, but then come back down and be functional about it.
Right, right. I'm trying to get the video for Liz because it is really not happening here.
Well, I can throw one up, I think, while
Yeah.
you're working on that.
Well, yeah,
Um,
because it's like I have the video, it's just not letting me.
okay.
Let me see if it allows me, if I can still show it. I don't. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna let me share my. Tell me if you can see it. Yeah, see, it's not letting me.
No.
It will not let me share my thing, which I wanted to. Hold on 1 second. I'm not sure why it's not allowing it to add to my. Um. Yeah, here.
Let me know if you want me to jump in.
Yeah, I might. Let's see. It's not. Ain't no likey. It's just ain't no likey. Hold on. Let me see if I can export it like I did the other ones. It's not letting me. Yeah, go ahead, Lisa. Tell me. Oh, wait. Here we go. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Now it has. There it is. Okay. Yikes. Technology, such a drag. All right, here we go. And this is Liz's video. We're gonna cut out the
Ready?
audio. Got a potty mouth.
Yep.
Well, but you
But
know
the
what? I
part
think I
push.
think it's important that we do have the
Well, you could tell there's vocalization. It's a shocker.
yeah.
Down.
Oh,
Can't.
here.
Oh, fuck. Really?
The bad words.
Get your head. Get your head. Down.
So I guess the question here would be, at what point does she get functional? At what point is this dog functional?
Go.
Yeah. So then that's here. I'll try to take off the potty mouth of Liz. So she stopped vocalizing a little bit before Liz relaxed. She was doing the whining, but she was a little more less.
She was less pushy, barky,
Yeah.
and with veracity, so to speak, to like push forward and stuff.
Yeah.
That was better.
Yeah.
Her mouth kind of closed a bit, right? Yeah, she was
Yeah.
vocalizing, but to some extent, you're going to accept that. Like Aussies, they're big mouths too.
Right.
So sometimes it's self-reinforcing depending on the individual.
Right. And Liz makes a good point here. You're gonna get, especially when they're young like this, you're gonna go take baby steps. You're gonna take a little less to get them to understand, and eventually you'll get to where you want to go. But you can't try to you can't try to
Get it
do
all
that
at
with
once.
it's just gonna frustrate you and the dog. So it's
Right.
really important that you guys think about the things that are, what you're going to take for now. The problem is when we take a little less, we get used to that, and then we just leave it that way. So it's
Yep.
really important that you just keep that in mind, right? That you're gonna be mindful about what you take, but you're going to be more, you're gonna meet the dog where it's at because it's young. And then as you get older, you're not gonna have that same, now she's a little older, she probably can get there much quicker, right? But again, this comes with training. And then when they're young, you're going to have to take a lot less sometimes. Depends on the day, right? You might, you might be great one day, and the next day you may not be able to. And I get that. I get that with jive with treats. If I have very high end treats, she can get pretty aroused and just have a difficult time focusing because the treats are so arousing for her, right? So we practice. We do a little bit of obedience, and we put a little bit of structure around it, so she's better with that. Yeah. All right, videos, Lisa. You have.
I have several. It just depends on what you want to see.
Let's see. You said GSD at the doorway.
Yep.
Hold on, which is
And you can just mute the sound.
this one. This one.
So
Yeah, this is a good one. So hold on, let me grab it, guys. So and this is something I teach. And Lisa, we're big on teaching. Like I had min pins that used to slip out of the door, that could get out of the door, and I was militant about teaching them to wait at the door. The dogs I have now are a little lower arousal dogs, so it's not as so I still can get them awake, but it's not as hard as that youngin was, right?
so this is a pretty young pup, and she was just super pushy, as you can tell. She's like, "Well, I want to go out the door." And she's like, "You can't. You got to settle first."
Oh my god, she's so cute. How old
She
was
is very cute. I don't remember. I think she was maybe 7 months thereabouts. So she's in a rough time for her. And so she just has to maintain not getting crazy. And so I think
right.
Jody's pulling out some treats here and stuff. And she's like, yeah, treats to help her make the right choices. But feet timing is critical in terms of reinforcement and what you're doing. So she tossed the cookie. Do you see how quick it happened? So she opened the door, but then sustain that was too hard to sustain it. So but she's still functional. Like she's still trying to sort it, right?
Yes, right.
And then she's like, oh, I like food. Okay. So I think, and the sad part about this, unfortunately, this dog was really people sensitive. And what ending up in the end was she ended up having a brain tumor. And had to be let go because she was not okay. It was a
Oh, that's
quality
a
of
shame.
life
She's
issue.
really pretty.
Yeah, she was cute. She was a cutie for sure. But super pushy, persistent. No shock there because of the breed, right? They're just like that.
That is true because Tango is pretty persistent on
Yeah, when they want to be, they'll be persistent on what they want, right?
yeah, right.
But that's what they're bred to do. So in this case, it's just all impulse control. Like, don't barge at the door. And she's like, I don't. And now the question I have is, what is more arousing to her? Is it the food or is it the door? Right? I mean, the food helps her, but then she gets impatient. So is that arousal or is that impatience? And I think that's impatience because you're seeing progress, right? And I
Right.
think this is stuff that people like. This is the hard part about training. You have to assess in the moment what is happening based upon the body language as to what your next step is. And this is where it gets tricky, right? Because we get caught up in our head and, well, she did the down. She's like, oh, stop talking about me. She did the down, right? And then she's like, oh, you don't want to do that. So she gave up and she's like, oh, darn it, I missed my opportunity. Help us, help. So she starts spinning up a little there because it's hard work. Can I go out now? And this was a facility I had where I had like 8,000 square feet, and she's getting playful. It's her way of fidgeting, right?
Yeah.
So it's a stress response. It's a fidget. So
No, she was cute.
yeah.
She ended up having a brain tumor. Wow, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
it was crazy because she had a hard time with people, just us handling her, and we saw and it wasn't like it's not that she was smart, but something was prohibiting her. So it was just, I thought she was adorable, of course, but sassy as get.
Yeah. All right.
So
So that's one way. Like I usually, for example, I tend to, teach waiting at the door because it's really, you know what I mean? It's important.
safety,
Yeah, it's safety, right?
you don't know who's on the other side.
What's Sarah I see?
Impulse control for Sarah, who's a beagle, a young beagle, and who is super pushy. And she, in her situation, she was so pushy to mom, and mom was very kind, right? And so, because she was kind, it kind of affected the relationship. So, Sarah would do things like, and don't mind me with my pants, um, but Sarah would do things like bite the couch or grab mom or whatever to make her do stuff. So, we're working on, and it's not that she's not smart, she just knows who she can get away with it, right? And see the intensity of where her tail is still wagging and she gets locked on the cookie. So I had to like pick and choose the points where were okay for her. Behind me is Sully, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I
Sully's
was
like,
gonna say.
oh, this is terrible. Good. So we're just working on it's your choice stuff or cookie store game, whatever you want to call it. Just don't grab it. And then the second she backed off, I took that and I was hoping for her to kind of be a little calmer, but I was taking what I could. But also, do you see her body language? She's
Yeah.
lifting her paw. She's a little uncertain, like, I don't, and I'm like, get it. And she's like, oh, I don't know what to do anymore. So we did a little bit, we played with did a little bit of love, and then I think we stopped at one point. So, but that was, yeah. So we did some love. She's like, oh, and then she amped up on that. I'm like, okay, that's enough. So, um, what
And then you
else?
have rudder up and down.
Do Walter in a crate. So this guy's a little
Yeah.
cute. This guy is the cutest little thing. Oh my goodness. He is beyond. Yes. Blanca wrote, working with a beautiful GSD that is doing the same thing with the owner. Owners are 90 and 75. Yikes, but such an amazing dog requires lots and lots of impulse control. Yep. And the thing is, as we get older, I don't know about you, but I'm less patient. I'm like, this is taking too long. So
Tell
I
me
have
about
to pick and choose. So here's Walter. He's adorable. And so to preface this, he's a little guy. He's under a year. Here he's much younger. He's probably more like 3 months. So Walter doesn't. He's gotten worse actually because he's a teenager. Now he'll stand and scratch nonstop at the crate to get out. First of all, mom doesn't put him in a crate. He's more in an X pen. She doesn't like the concept or idea of a crate, which to each his own. I mean, he's a single dog, but then you have to watch what their requirements are. So here we are working, coming out of a crate. You get a cookie. He's like, what's happening? So all he has to do is not push forward, and eventually we'll build a sit or something beforehand, coming out of the crate and then releasing. But right now he's standing, but he's not moving forward, so we're taking it. So this is what we were talking about earlier in terms of slicing things down. So if the dog doesn't know a sit or can't maintain itself, you can take something different. But see how he popped up right away? She's like, that's not the answer. Going forward is not the answer. He didn't figure it there,
nice.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he's a pistol, that one. Smart as smart can be, but he's allowed to do certain behaviors because everybody picks what's important to them. So in day school, we have to rework some things just because he's like, you don't have the same rules, and so we
Yeah.
have to help that.
Yeah. It's like you don't mean it.
Right? You're not. Nobody else cares. Why do you? Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Um,
Good.
Good. And he
Oh my
came
God,
out
he's so
nicely,
cute.
right? he came out and she helped him by luring him out too, to say, slow it down and you sit and get cookies. Because usually we get the inside of the crate, but we don't get the outside where then they bolt out.
Right. Right.
And that and all that's relative to like how important that is to you. To me, it's important because I feel it's a mindset. And then she teaches them to go back in because it's equally important, right? Because we're pretty good about reinforcing, like, for example, going out doorways, we're pretty good about reinforcing the one side, but not when they go across the threshold to the other side.
Right. And
So,
actually, this is so interesting that you mentioned about coming out. I think we did. I think it was Sue with Rambo, where we had to work on because he'd be able to wait to come out of the crate, but then when he was out, he was like bouncing. He was trying to
yeah.
go other places. So we just put a sit after he gets out. You come out, you sit, which and talk about patience. You have to because everything's going to take longer for you to get to the to go where you're going. You have him sit to get out, come out and sit. But it was necessary because if you didn't do that, his arousal would go up so much that he would then get barky and
And then
more,
stop thinking.
and then stop thinking. Right. So it was something that we definitely needed to address with that. Uh, yeah.
So the other thing I did in preparation for today, I was like, I wonder. And so the dogs at the door video that I videotaped. So I had to leave the house. I come back. All my dogs are out, including my 7 month old, roughly 7 month old Minnie. And everybody greets me at the door. So I think this is another piece, right? Because this is regular everyday life. This is not specific to any kind of sport. It's about being in your brain and being thoughtful across the board,
Yes.
including when people come in the house. Now, typically, and I don't make a big deal out of it. I'm like, hi guys, I got to put stuff down. The one who is the most impulsive right now, and don't mind the dirty door, I just realized I have to
We have
clean it.
dogs. We have dogs. I get it.
I was like, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's like bad housekeeper.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I walk in and the two, just pay attention. So there's a Papillon, there's a mini Aussie, there's two mini Aussies. One's got a tail, one doesn't. My Dutchie, my Border Collie, and my cattle dog. Hello, Border Collie. There's the Dutch, cattle dog, Papillon. And then over in the left side, what you can't see, this guy, he's more sassy. And what I didn't get was he started jumping at, and there's Ivy, started jumping at the Dutchie, a little
Yeah, I
mouth
saw
of
that. I
excitement.
did.
And I'm like, oh, you can't be doing this. And then he does this stuff, which makes me insane. But he's almost 7 months, and there's my Papillon Touch Me. And then there's another friend that's staying with us. And I didn't even add her to the mix because
But you do see, if you really
she's a
look
little
at it, you do see the little snap at your
Yep.
on the bottom
To the
left.
Dutch. Yep.
So there's the Dutchie.
Yep. She's like, hey, you can see her ears pop
Yeah,
up too.
and you see him. Yep.
Yep.
And yeah, she did go.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And then she gave him a little bit of a.
Yeah, she does.
She. If
I'm
you
like,
really,
go ahead.
if you if you really look at it, she gave him a little shake,
And
a
then a
head
shake.
shake, and she's a little bit like, don't even
Mhm.
over here.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
And then
there's a mini without a tail that ran ahead, but see how he gets a little aroused?
yeah.
It's not, yeah. And I'm like, we need to stop that. So guess what? I have a choice. I can train it or manage it. I will probably opt to manage that because I can't be on the same side as him to address it, right? So you have to manage at some point, which means he doesn't get to greet everybody. If I really wanted to work it, I'd start him with a dog, probably Ivy, who would be like, you don't do that. She's a little more firm.
Yes.
Whereas my Dutch she's a little sensitive around dogs. So then she's more inclined to
Man.
not. Yeah, she won't correct him. She'll be like, that's not nice. I mean, and when she does, it'll be a big blast and then he'll cry and, stuff like that. So
There's a lot
I
of
want to avoid
fun.
that.
Yeah. So the impulse control, and you also have to make sure, and Lisa alluded to it before, is about being impatient and being aroused. Sometimes you have both working together, and sometimes it's only one. But I'm kind of a big fan of a lot of impulse control when they're young because it just makes life much easier when they're older. Um, and when they learn that, you don't run, you don't jump on the other dog, you don't, because that's how sometimes these events happen where you have a dog fight. Doorways are a big place for that to happen. So even though your dogs every other way they'll be fine, but in the doorway it's a big problem. It's a big issue, right? So
Mhm.
you definitely want to be thoughtful about where you handle it, and like you said, and managing the doorway situation, like with the young one, is not also one of the is not letting them practice it. If you
Right.
can't train it, don't let them be jumping in the other dog's faces when they're excited, right?
Yeah, and I think that rehearsal is huge. I don't know. I get called in a lot about doorway issues and
Oh yeah,
blah, blah, and stuff, right? And I'm like, don't let them rehearse. And it also depends. Like if they've had a history of doing it for a period of time, well, in that case, I'm going to be like, you need to replace, stop the behavior dead in its track, try to overlay something different. And when you're available to train it, then train it. Put the dog on leash and don't allow rehearsed love. So I find too, like at doorways, is it's a big excitement opening of yay, something good is happening, right? And then the dogs, depending on age, clearly my Aussie is, my puppy is needs some work on that, but he's young.
yeah. Well, no, and it's one of those, and that's why I'm kind of big on, like, my dogs don't have a lot of friends, or whatever, but I do make it a point to have them be able to play and be able to manage, and especially now that they're becoming teenagers, right? It's a lot different when they're becoming adolescents than when they were puppies, because you'll see more like, "Hey, cut that out," or
Testing.
"Hey, stop
Yep.
that." Lot more testing, so you
Mhm.
definitely want them to be able to become, and the whole point of having some playtime and being able to put some rules around it is so that they learn how to behave around other dogs.
Right.
Because not all dogs are dogs, right? They're not going to be like love dogs forever. My lab has particular dogs that she likes to play with. My female, she's not a doggy dog. She's not, never has been, but she has her boys. She likes the Melanie and Joanne's Vishlas, and mostly the male dogs. She's pretty good. Females, she's pretty tolerant, but if a female challenges her, she's gonna back it up. So, so she has dogs that she gets to play with. My shepherd is a little much. He does have friends as well, that understand his play style. And my young puppy is a lot like Jive in that he's a people dog, not a dog's dog, but got a lot more. He's a little better skilled when it comes to other dogs. For whatever reason, he's a little more tolerant. He was a
Today I
he was a slow start, but he's better now.
today I got a call. I went into a private lesson, and it was a Great Dane puppy who was about 4 months, something like that, 3 or 4 months old. And then the other one was a 3-year-old golden retriever female, and the Great Dane was a male. And he was a little punk. So mom was afraid because the golden was growling, and she's like, I think she's guarding and this and that. I'm like, well, she's setting rules. This puppy was pushing every single button that she had. And this dog, I was like, do you know how lucky you are that she's so tolerant? He would try to take things out of her mouth, and she's like, you can't have it. And then she'd snap at him. She's like, see? I'm like, no, he's being super rude and trying to take the toy out of her mouth. That's inappropriate. And then she'd grab another toy, and then he'd stand there and yell at her, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you got to intervene there, because it's not fair to have that young puppy rehearse that, number one, and then two, have her be harassed in that manner. So it was very interesting, the dynamics of it, right? And they're already setting rules and understanding between the housemates. And I'm like, don't let that keep happening, because it's not fair to you. It's not a path you want to go down.
Right.
But they were really, really, the golden was lovely, really, really appropriate. But the I was like, I think he's going to give you a little run for your money. He's a little bit different than what you're used to. So, but it's some rule setting, I think. And dogs don't speak the same language as we do. They speak dog way better than we do.
Right.
So sometimes I think you have to. It depends. And if you're uncertain, get video and ask. But she was super worried about that. So it was
Yeah.
interesting.
So One of the things I wanted to show you, and I think um, and this is with agility, because a lot of people think when they see a dog running and spinning and just out of control
Or yelling.
or yelling that that's a really great agility dog. And the truth is, um, that's not it.
Teetering on dysfunction.
Right. Where this little dog, and this is at Westminster. She's a high
Oh,
level.
that's John Crank.
Yep, Jen Crank. Her
Right.
dog is pretty. Stop it.
Pretty
So,
adorable. Of course, it's a Papillon.
oh my God, yeah, whatever.
Look at the legs. Woo! Legs for
but,
miles.
but you're looking at a dog that's aroused but under control and functional, and that's what you're looking for is functional. Because if it's not functional, it's not useful, right? Especially if you those of us who do dog sports.
Yep.
So the dog is
Nice.
she's nice and aroused. She went a little wide, but she's the dog is
Shoot.
is in control, and she's able to listen, and she's able to follow. And that is the biggest thing. That's arousal at its at its finest, right? Because
All
she's
right.
pretty under control, and she's able to follow what the handler is saying, and
Yeah,
that's what.
you see around that one turn, she actually is like, "What do you want me to do?" Because she's looking for information, right?
Right,
At that corner, and there was a little long a delay of eye contact there bec- because she was looking for information, but she still held it together enough and didn't jump up and bite the handler or run off or say, "I'm making my own course." Stayed
right,
connected. That was
right,
cool. Yeah,
right.
Gabby. Yeah.
So that because and she was able to. They were they were able. She was able to take in information and think and focus, and that
Mhm.
is what you are looking for when you're performance. Can they do it at speed? And that takes time and a lot of training. And it does start with the basics that we talked about here. To get your dog started to control them, I do it with all my dogs, whether they're highly aroused or not. Waiting at the door is a big deal. Waiting coming out of the crate. My young dog likes to just bust out of the crate. I don't like that. So when I can, I try to make them wait for it. Jumping out of the car without me giving them permission is really not allowed because it's a safety issue. So those are all basic things that the dogs need to learn and have some skills around, and it's easy because then when you go to do other things in their life, they already understand about impulse control and self-control. But a lot of times they're like, well, he's just a border collie, or he's just the this, or he's just high drive, and put no controls on it. A good working dog will be able to listen and do it asked at in an aroused state. It just takes time to train it. And so, again, some dogs, if you have dogs that just fall off the rails, it's going to take more work. Where dogs that are a little more even keeled won't be as much. But those are all basic things. The leave it, you know, the recall, calling out of play. Those are all things that you can start doing when they're young,
Yeah.
so that they already understand, they know how to bring it down. And Suzanne has a great game where just where you do it in puppy class. You rev up the puppies, get them
Mhm.
excited, and then stop and ask them to sit. So they start learning at a really young age
Yeah.
to bring it.
That's the and the comparable one for kids is the freeze dance game. Same idea. Get
Yes,
excited, stop, control your body. Yeah. So
right.
I really enjoy that doing that with them.
Yep. Yeah, because people think, and that's what it's doing. They think drive and arousal and energy are confused. We see a lot more. We see a lot of people think that, oh, he's just energetic when the dog is really aroused. That's often that's often the most cases we get, right? They're the dog. Oh, he's really high energy. It's like, nope, he's
Nope.
just really really aroused, and
Yeah.
that's I mean, not that you wouldn't have both, because you can have both, but
Ugh.
most of the
Ouch.
yeah. Well, and if you're doing high-end dog sports like
Yes.
IPO, or some agility, yeah, you definitely want that, right?
Right.
Especially if those of the people who want the really high drive agility dogs that can do that. Yeah, world team dogs. Like my dog is not. We do agility. We're doing it starting agility, but we just want to get through
Playing. Have fun.
respectable and have a good time. we're never going to be we're never going to be that because you need a certain dog for that. So anyway, I hope you guys found this helpful about arousal and kind of how to manage that because it is a big it is a it's hard. I'm not gonna lie. It took I would say Lisa and I we worked together a lot with a lot of dogs and figuring out energy versus arousal was one of the more challenging
Mhm.
things we had to really be able to dissect and looked at. And sometimes we were spot on, and sometimes we needed a little more work on it. So it takes a bit to
Me personally, in my older age, as I age, I have to tell you, like that high arousal, that not thinking is not desirable for me. Um, I am not. I mean, now I would rather have a dog who's like, let's and has pauses a minute, then reacts. I want that pause, and I want that built in because it's hard. It's hard. I've done it, and I'm like, I'm too old and tired
right.
to do it.
They would raise more questions for me. Will there be a part two? Sure. Because arousal, like I said, it takes a very long time
Yep.
to get very good at reading it and working it and actually, coming up with, what you have. Like Zippy, Deb is not high energy. He's more aroused sometimes. So, but like today, so when he was mentally tired, he had his ORT today. So he did a lot of he did a little bit of playtime in the morning. Then we did his mental work, and then he had a little bit of afternoon playtime. So in his afternoon playtime, he was a little bit more reserved, and he was able to be more thoughtful. But that's because he was already a little bit more mentally pooped out, which was great, right? It's a good thing. And then it was a nice little appropriate playtime, and then you know he was able to just be more.
One thing too, though, it's you have to know your dog. But I will say that, like, some people think that you can burn off arousal. That's
No,
not the case.
no, you
So,
have to.
you're right. Yeah.
It's got to be some mental will help that more than physical for
Yeah.
sure, no
Yes,
question.
and I think that's where people think, "Oh, they just need a big yard to run in," or, "Oh,
Nope,
well." I'm like, "No,
nope.
that dog's aroused. That's not energy. That's
Right,
different."
right.
So,
Right, because with and you saw it in all the dogs, right? We had a little playtime after everybody did their ORT. The playtime was a lot more subdued because they were mentally tired, which made for a very nice playtime. You know what I mean? It was a little bit more chilled, so it was nice. But yeah, doing that's what I mean. Doing some mental work, a little scent work, or boxes or whatever will help burn off bring down that arousal to a more focused control level, which is why, except for the humping, yeah, but he's not so bad. And it just, you have to interrupt it. And he does it. He's doing it a lot less than he used to, which is great. You know what I mean? You're starting to see that come down more because when he was younger, it was a little harder, but you can see it kind of reduced down. It's not as, and it doesn't last as long, and he doesn't go back to it. So
well,
that's
how
what you're
old is
always
he
looking.
now?
Yeah, which is what you're always looking for, right? Like, is it getting better? And it is. It's just,
How old is he now?
he's like 14 months, 15
Okay.
months.
So he's coming to the end of his teenage time too, where
Yeah,
things starting to piece together.
right. And they're starting to, and you see him, he gets a little humpy, but he's able to be interrupted and stops, which is nice.
Yep.
So it'll come. Yeah. He's 15 months. Yeah. So he's a month younger than Mumbo. So yeah. But yeah, and then but he just doesn't do it as long as he's not as persistent on it. So it helps. All right, guys. We'll see you all next week. Uh, next week we have
Sue, right? Sue Sternberg or Dana
yes,
and Dana.
yes. Next week we have Sue Sternberg and I think Dana Zinn that are going to be talking about dog-driven searches for scent work. But still interesting if you guys want to tune in. We're going to have a fun show for you next week. So we'll see you then. All
Bye.
right. Bye.